So my name's Rob Hawks, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about what Firefox is doing and some of the JavaScript-related APIs and sort of technologies that we're implementing. So if you don't already know, I work at Mozilla. That was my business card until it disappeared. There you go. So my official job title is Technical Evangelist, which is basically sort of engaging with the developer community like you guys. I prefer what it says on my business card, which is Rocket Scientist. We just get to choose our own sort of stuff. That's basically because I'm related to a lot of gaming stuff at Mozilla, and that's one of the games I worked on. I'm not sure how much time we'll have for questions. We'll probably do questions at the end together, if that sounds okay with Opera. I'll put these slides online as well after the talk, and so you can sort of check out all the resources I've linked to as well. So I haven't got that long with you guys. I've only got like 15 minutes. There's no way I can cover absolutely everything in that time. So instead I'm going to cover some of my favourite sort of technologies and some of the features that are landing or sort of are coming in the future. And I'll give you a bunch of resources to find out more of those at the end of the talk as well. So pretty much 1 year ago, Firefox was at version 4. As of today, the latest public release is version 12, with versions 13, 14 and 15 already going through developer testing. This new rapid release process has basically allowed us to push many more features to developers and users in a much shorter time span, which is a pretty good thing. One of the sort of things we're doing at Mozilla right now is something called Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro is not a product, but it's more of an initiative. And the idea of this is to bring together a whole bunch of things we're working on, including Firefox, Boot2Gecko, which is our developer phone, which I actually have one of these today if you want to see it later, which is just a phone created with JavaScript and HTML, web apps, which is something I'll cover in a little bit more detail in a moment, and Persona, which is basically our identity platform. And the idea is in September, when we sort of converge all of these projects together, we'll have what we call the web as a platform. That's the general idea, and it's something we're working towards with all of our products, Firefox being one of them. So one of the big things we're working on right now in Firefox is web APIs. So they're basically a set of technologies that allow you to access hardware of devices. So like I was showing you that phone, things like that, and also accessing things on like desktop hardware. And so one approach we're taking with Boot2Gecko, for example, is replicating the functionality of a mobile phone. So one of the questions we had is, what JavaScript APIs do we need to sort of create a mobile phone environment? What's missing today that we need to do that? So this is what Boot2Gecko is, and basically we have this ecosystem of APIs that we're working on right now. And there's a website called Are We Mobile Yet, which shows you the status of them. So the ones in green are ones that have landed already, and the ones in red are ones that we're working on currently. And like I said, this is sort of leading on to what we're working on with Boot2Gecko. So not inherently Firefox, but Boot2Gecko is important because it's using the underlying Gecko engine, which Firefox is built on. So what lands in Boot2Gecko, what lands in Firefox, sort of transcends into the other technology. Now I won't cover any more of Boot2Gecko in any more detail, but like I said, if you want to sort of grab the phone and have a play with it, then I definitely advise you to do that later. And I'll be around tomorrow as well. So one of the APIs that we're working on that has been updated recently is touch events. So touch events are pretty standard, they're on iOS, it's kind of expected. The JavaScript APIs have sort of matured very recently, and we now have multi-touch events on like Firefox Android. We also have it on Boot2Gecko and in the browser. There's other APIs like camera device access. So this is one of the web APIs that I was talking about. So the camera API allows you to access the camera hardware. So this is important for two reasons. One, for just simply accessing the hardware on like a mobile device like Boot2Gecko. And the other is for other technologies like WebRTC, which I'll move on to in a moment. Some other technologies that we're working on, particularly for mobile, are things like web vibration APIs. So we actually had to change the name of this because it used to be called Web Vibrator API, and it didn't quite go down as well as it probably should have. So yeah, we changed it to be a little bit more serious, and the idea is hooking into the hardware of the phone. So what's interesting about this is that you can now use JavaScript and actually make something physical happen in the real world, which it's kind of interesting. So all of these APIs that are for the phone environment sort of side of Firefox, it's very interesting how they changed the way you sort of use web technologies. Related to that are other things like battery API. So the battery API is something else that we landed fairly recently, which allows you to poll the state of a battery on a mobile device. So this is pretty important, not only just to sort of replicate a mobile phone environment, but also, say, for example, if you're doing animations or games, and you need to know sort of the state of a battery level. If you know that the phone isn't plugged in and it's got a low charge, then you can actually either let the user know this and let them know that the game experience might not last that long, or sort of gracefully degrade that experience so it allows the battery to last as long as possible. There's also things like the full screen API. So this landed in a whole bunch of browsers very recently. And while technically not part of the web API stuff, it's pretty important for mobile devices and web applications. And it allows you to use a single DOM element and make that element the entire, sort of fill the entire screen. Previously we'd use like view full screen, which basically changes the entire browser environment, all the tabs, all the windows and everything, whereas this just uses one DOM element. So this is currently used for like HTML5 video. You can use it for things like canvas elements as well. Related to the mobile side of things, we're landing things like screen orientation APIs. So this allows you to sort of change and lock the orientation of a single DOM element on particularly on mobile devices is what it's most used for. So for example, if you're using the full screen API of a game or a web app, you don't want it sort of constantly rotating around, and you probably don't want to set the system orientation lock that changes every single app and you have to turn it off again. So yeah, before now it's been incredibly difficult to lock it in that way. So now you can lock a specific DOM element, which is incredibly useful for full screen apps and games. So going back to the camera device access, there's things like WebRTC which are coming soon. So WebRTC is currently being worked on. It's going to allow video conferencing in the browser, so basically like Skype in the browser. But it's actually a whole bunch of smaller components like the camera device access, peer-to-peer communication, that kind of stuff. So the individual components are going to be quite interesting to see how they're used, particularly in things like sort of the peer-to-peer network communication, how that's going to sort of open up the gates for sort of different ways of communicating via the browser. The other thing we're working on is open web apps. So I covered this sort of briefly. The concept of web apps is gaining a lot of traction at the moment, and I mean, no doubt this sort of traction is because of like the success of things like iOS and sort of the native markets. And it's something we're spending a lot of time on at Mozilla. So we're working on open web apps as such. So a set of APIs that sort of put developers and users back in control of the web application process. So for developers, this is important because it puts them in control of distribution, where they sell those apps, where they distribute these apps, how they communicate with the users that buy those apps. And for users, it gives them more choice about where they get those apps from and how. So one of the things we're working on, which you just saw, was the Mozilla Marketplace, which is sort of launching fairly soon. So that's one avenue to install and distribute web apps. You could put those on your own website if you really want to. The APIs are there for you to do that. So the process of installing an open web app is basically you just take a normal website and you add a JSON file. And that JSON file just describes the application, so its icons and its title, that kind of stuff. And everything else is handled by the browser. So when you call an install method, whether via Marketplace or manually on your own website, for example, in Firefox, it will pop up a door hanger, which basically just says, do you want to install this application? And then from there, the browser will handle the rest, installing it into a relevant location. So one of the other challenges for this is how to make these applications feel like sort of real native applications, like desktop applications, rather than just a glorified website. So one of the ways that's being considered and that we're implementing is completely removing the browser Chrome and running the application in its own window. So yeah, it will effectively mean that you have full control over your UI of the app, and it won't look like it's running in a browser. So we call this WebRT, which is Web Runtime. And by using WebRT, you can install the app sort of directly into the operating system. So for example, on the Mac, it would go in your applications folder, and it would be a .app file, and you can put it in your dock. It's got an icon. As far as the user is concerned, it looks like an application. But when you run it, and this is in Firefox Nightly right now, when you install the app and you run it, it looks like a standard application. As far as the developer is concerned, all it is a web view, basically, with no browser Chrome. And it runs in a separate process as well, which is important. And by separate process, I mean separate to your browser. Some of the other interesting APIs we're working on are game-related APIs. Now, I did a talk earlier about games in more detail, and the slides are all online, but I just wanted to cover a couple that I particularly like. One of them is the pointer lock API. So I don't know if you've ever played games on like Flash, for example, and like you may have to move the mouse around or something, and if you move the mouse and it goes out of the screen, then you have to sort of bring it back in, and then you've got to scroll it out again and bring it back in and scroll it out again. Not a great experience. So what the pointer lock does is it ties in with things like the full screen API, and it allows you to get a much sort of more immersive gaming experience within the browser. By doing this, you lock the mouse cursor into the middle of the screen, and then you basically base your movement in the game on the distance from that position. So the mouse is invisible as far as the user is concerned, and they sort of get a much better experience, particularly in 3D games. The other interesting one is the Gamepad API. Now, this hasn't technically landed yet, but it's something we're working on, and it's pretty interesting to see how it changes the way input is used, particularly for games. So we're working on this with the Chrome guys, and I'm particularly interested to see how, if this was rolled into things like TVs, how it would change the way we sort of use consoles. Like, would we need a console if we had a browser and a TV using the Gamepad API? So here's a quick little demo of it running. Obviously a video. So that's an Xbox 360 controller connected to Firefox, just using the API, simple JavaScript API. And I've just hooked it up to the game Rockets that I'm working on. And it completely changes the way you play the game just by changing the input methods. So yeah, I'll leave that as that. But it's just very interesting to sort of play around with those new versions of input. Some of the other stuff we're working on are improvements to performance. So one of these is Snappy, which aims to basically improve responsiveness in Firefox on the desktop. So its purpose is to improve things like startup time, the responsiveness of like UI elements, as well as things like page load time, navigation speed, and stuff like that. So we're landing a whole bunch of fixes in this area, and I've included all the links to more information on that. Another project we're working on is MemShrink, which basically aims to reduce the memory consumption in Firefox, which will make the browser basically faster and more stable. So this is achieved in two ways, basically by slimming down the amount of memory used in general, but also by sort of fixing things like memory leaks and sort of other interesting uses of memory. So as with Snappy, we've landed a whole bunch of fixes in this recently, and it's continuously improving. One of the improvements that's made a big sort of impacts, particularly in like animations and games, is incremental garbage collection. So before this, we had a few issues where sort of you had a hardcore sort of animation or game running, you'd get a sort of a stall or a pause every so often. With incremental garbage collection, we sort of managed to sort of avoid some of these pauses by spreading out the garbage collection process over a same period of time, but doing it more regularly in smaller intervals. And this has changed the way games are sort of the performance of games completely without having sort of game developer having to do much. So this actually landed in Firefox 15, which is, I believe, the current nightly version. So just quickly, before I finish, the other thing we're working on is developer tools, sort of built into the browser. So you're probably aware of Firebug if you use Firefox. These developer tools are actually built directly in, so we're trying to sort of provide the core functionality that a developer would need without having to install add-ons. So you've got your core stuff like Page Inspector, Style Inspector, that kind of stuff. Now this is already working in the browser. If you right-click and do Inspect Element, you can see all of this working today. There's some other interesting stuff like Tilt, which is basically a 3D view of the web page. Now it might look like a gimmick, but it's actually quite interesting to use to see sort of like the how many nested elements you have in your DOM, because they all sort of start building up like these mountains. And if anyone plays Minecraft, someone actually made a Minecraft level using Tilt and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. So from top down it looks like a map, and then you turn Tilt on and it actually looks like Minecraft. There's also things like the style editor, which allow you to sort of actually dig into the JavaScript styling and then change it on the fly and then save that back out, and so you can sort of re-upload that back to your website. And in a similar vein, we have the JavaScript Scratchpad. So you might have like used a console to sort of edit JavaScript. Well, now you have the ability to actually write full JavaScript files and apply that on the fly to a website, and then save that back out. And then obviously you've got other things like the web console and stuff like that. And there's a whole bunch more coming. There's I've got a whole bunch of links in the slides. One of the last ones to cover briefly is got a JavaScript debugger now built into the browser. So you may be familiar with this from like Chrome and stuff like that. So this is what we're working on now in Firefox built into the browser. And we're working on things like mobile debugging as well through this. So I've covered a whole bunch of stuff. If you want to keep up, there's a whole bunch of resources to sort of do that. There's the Mozilla Wiki, which has a whole bunch of pages on things like the platform functionality, what we're doing with desktop, also what we're doing with mobile as well. If you're interested in the games-related APIs and the device APIs, we have the Are We Fun Yet page on the Mozilla Wiki. Again, all the links are in these slides. If you're interested in the what we're doing with Boot2Gecko and, like I said, the web APIs and device APIs, then Are We Mobile Yet is a fantastic resource for that, as well as some of the wiki pages on that too. And if you just want to keep up to date with just generally what we're doing with development, then the Hacks Mozilla blog is also a good place. That's where myself and my colleagues write about what we're working on. Also, if you just want to try these things out, Firefox Aurora is basically a good place to sort of get started. The release process is Firefox, Firefox Beta, Firefox Aurora, and then nightly, 6 weeks in between each process. Aurora is a good place to sort of start playing with stuff with a fairly good idea that it's going to land publicly. Firefox Nightly is basically, as it says, nightly. It's where sort of the first sort of implementations of something will land. Not necessarily guaranteed that that's going to fall into the next process within 6 weeks, but you can be sure that it's going to sort of land soon. So it's a good place to test things out, like the Gamepad API, for example. And the last thing, if you just want to talk to guys at Mozilla, then jump on IRC. We're pretty much it's where we live. So there's a whole bunch of channels. I've put all the channels in the slide notes as well. So if you're interested in like the open web app stuff or the device APIs or Boot2Gecko, then definitely jump on IRC and just ping us. So that's me. I'm Rob Hawks, at Rob Hawks on Twitter if you want to follow me. I'll put these slides up on slideshare.net/Rob Hawks and you can sort of follow along later. And that's basically me done. So I'll pass you over to Opera.
My name is Luz Caballero. I work for Opera as a web opener, which is someone who tries to make the web open. And I'm going to speak about what's new in the Opera mobile browsers. So I only have 15 minutes. I'm going to try to quickly go over everything. Well, first, Opera has two browsers, mobile and mini. I'm going to focus a bit more on mobile, which is the non-proxy browser. But also, I wanted to show you this slide. If you speak Chinese, this is Opera's Chinese browser, which right now has 5% of the Chinese market, I think, which is pretty interesting because China is a big market, I guess. And if you speak Chinese or you want to try it or you want to give it a go, it's a pretty interesting browser because I guess that it includes some things that are particular or they're like pretty prevalent in China, which is social network integration and games integration, which is not so common for the most known browsers here. You can find it at open.com. So I'm going to just not focus on it because I don't think I could even find the download button in there. So I'm going to focus a bit more on mobile. So the last mobile, Opera mobile version is number 12. It has the new HTML5 parser called Ragnarok. It also has almost, or I would say, complete ECMAScript 5.1 support, except for some anecdotal, like really obscure features. You can find more about specs support for it at that link below. It's going to be on the slides later. It also has an improved version of our JavaScript engine called Tarakan. And mainly what's new in it, in this version, is that we have increased information we store about each object, making it a lot faster or more performant for just-in-time code, and also making it reducing overhead. But switching into some more interesting features, which is what I wanted to focus on, I have made some videos to try to show how these features really work on the phone. So first, camera access and WebGL. What I'm going to show is a demo. I don't know how well you can see it there. It's a demo that takes the stream from a video from the camera source on the phone, and then takes each pixel and looks at the color composition of the pixel and the number of pixels with each color, and then represents that in an RGB cube. I don't know how bright you can see that in there, but that's a cube where each side is R, G, and B, and there you have all the colors, and the sphere size is related to the amount of pixels with that color. So I'm going to show a video of that actually working on a phone. So there we go. You cannot really see the colors in there. God, it looks much better in my screen. But if you see it there, it's taking some red and blue, and you can turn it around. That's WebGL. So there is switching to HSV, I think, or whatever it is, like a cone. And you can see it working. If you go to the link down there, you can just use it and test it on your phone on the Opera 12 mobile browser. So another thing is orientation support. I have another video to show that. This demo is just a form. It uses device orientation and device motion in order to change color when you rotate the phone. And then on shake, it uses device motion to delete the contents of the form, empty it. So here goes the video. I'm sorry you cannot really see it very well, or at least not see the contents of the form. Again, if you go to the link down there, you can just try it on your phone. This should also work in Opera 12. So another thing we have in mobile, but this time in labs, not in 12, is extensions. So we have the same extensions that we have for the desktop browser, but this time working in mobile, except for, I think, for now we don't support speed dial extensions, but we do support all the same extensions for the rest of the extensions. Here you can see a video. This is an Opera Labs where I have installed Web of Trust, the extension that lets you know how shady a website is. So that's a search for screensavers, a shady term if there's ever one. So you can see on scrolling there how, or maybe you cannot, how the little donuts for Web of Trust show up next to each search result, which is what the extension does. So another labs version of Opera, this time for page media. So what page media does is it takes a huge chunk of content and it turns it into pages, the way that native pages would look. So you can just swipe around in order to go through the content. I have another video for that. That's another version of Opera Labs, where we have several books on the speed dial. That's Alice in Wonderland, and that's how it looks. I will show a little bit of the syntax later to show what you can do with it. But basically, do you see it? This is how it looks. So you have add media, paged, which is prefixed for now. And there you can just add any style you want. What you see there, overflow O paged X, means that the pagination will happen horizontally. You can also have Y, and then it will just paginate vertically. But you can add anything else you want there, just multi-column or whatever else you want, like I showed before. And the spec for this is CSS generated content for page media. You can just have a look at the draft in there. So another thing that's coming, and it's not even in a labs version for now, is better remote debugging. So right now, what we have our debugger Dragonfly, and the way you have to do it is you have to activate the remote debugging from your desktop computer or whatever you're using, and then you have to go to Opera:/debug on your phone, and you have to type the IP of the computer where you have the debugger in order to debug the pages in mobile. So this happens over the network, which is pretty cool, but still it's annoying to have to type the IP address. So what's coming next? I will show a video. Is a better way. Oh, God, this is... Okay, well, this is not nice. Okay, I'm going to just have to explain this, I guess. So, yeah, because we don't have much time. So the way it will happen in the future is that you will just open your Dragonfly in your desktop computer, and you will enable remote debugging. And then when you go to your device, and you just go to Opera:/debug, what you will find is a list of all the active Dragonfly instances, and you will just click connect. So hopefully this will be even easier than it is now. Another thing that's coming soon is a JavaScript profiler. So I don't know if you're familiar with our CSS profiler, where we're looking forward to complement that with a JavaScript profiler. So if you stay tuned on the Dragonfly blog, which is that address there, I hope that it will be announced soon. And finally, another news related to the Opera Mini browser, the Opera proxy browser, is that it has its own Next channel. So hopefully we are going to have a place where we can showcase everything that's new for the Opera Mini browser too. So this is it. I think I've made it to the 15-minute and to finally 5:45. I don't know if you have any questions. We can take questions together.
Yeah, I have a question regarding that Shake API that you were showing in the video. So it would be used potentially to clear the form, and it looked like it was being used on an iOS device, like an iPhone or something. Would that override the default undo typing behavior, or wouldn't there be some kind of functionality collision? Or maybe I'm misunderstanding what.
Yeah, that was used on an Android phone because Opera Mobile doesn't run on iOS.
Obviously, okay, sorry.
So yeah, that's what it was.
So
yeah.
If there ever were, would the API be able to check if there was a default set for a function like that, or some kind of accelerometer thing? I don't know if the API would expose that in order to override a functionality, maybe on an Android or something that had a Shake already set somehow at the OS level. Does that make sense?
So your question is if did you get?
Maybe I can read
yeah.
it. Is there a way for that API to check if there's already functionality set for something?
So you mean that you, as a developer, can say, okay, I want to, because right now, I guess what it does is just override it. I mean, I'm not sure, I guess so. So you mean that you, as a developer, will be able to check if there's another functionality and see if you want. I don't really know. I don't know. I can find out. So if you just tweet to me, I will find out and reply back.
So I may have missed this. How did it connect from the desktop debugger to the remote debugging session?
Okay, so it's over the network. You have to be on the same network right now.
So it just will find devices on the network?
Yeah, the way it works now is that you open your debugger and you click on a button. I had a nice video that showed it all. I'm sorry, I don't know why it didn't play. you open your debugger, you open Dragonfly, and you have a button that says Enable Remote Debugging, and then you open your phone, you go to Opera:/debug, and you have to find the IP on the network of the machine that has the debugger on it, and you have to type it in, and then they connect over the network. But the way it will be hopefully soon is that you will just go to Opera:/debug on your phone, and instead of having to type the IP, you would just have like all the different Dragonfly instances that are on your same network, and you will just have to choose. So that's it. I mean, it's pretty. I had to do it often, and it's pretty annoying when you have to type on the phone.
I have to do it often too, and it is annoying.
Yeah.
So Mozilla for Bennett, you call it mobile on Android. Bennett.
Yeah.
Do you have a remote debugger?
We're working on a remote debugger, yeah, to be built into the development tools that I was showing you. Yeah, that's the idea. So it's kind of it's not usable yet, but it's being worked on. So yeah, you can't use it right now, but the idea is to have that built in because it's pretty important.
Yeah.
If you're doing mobile development. So.
Can I ask about a couple other features, and you guys can just say yes or no on them? Like Web Audio API on your mobile versions. Like I haven't been able to get it to work on either. Does it exist?
Well, so we don't have Web Audio API at all. We have Audio Data API, which is slightly different. So we're trying to work on getting that more consistent with the Google guys. But yeah, right now, Web Audio API we don't have at all.
And how about Opera?
Gosh.
You don't have Web Audio API either.
No, I don't think so. I think we're working on it, but no, we don't.
It's extremely important to me because I know that Apple won't give it to us ever unless they're pushed to, because it will compete with iTunes, and I'd like to stick it to Apple. I'd love to see that. And how about Media Capture API?
So like camera access.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's being landed today. So as in not right now, but that's being worked on. So that's what we sort of developing with Boot2Gecko and things like that, is the ability to access the camera hardware. I believe that's landed already. Looks like Brendan's got something to say, but yeah.
You can use a file widget, and you put it
Yeah.
in this file right now to capture.
That works on Fennec, right?
Stock browser is
And how about capturing the microphone?
If you want to do something more involved, like a video or an audio capture, you have to get media.
Yeah.
Media, which is coming. I'm not sure what the schedule is, but it's coming very soon. About audio data, I understand now from Robert Callahan that it's basically the one today. A bunch of people with very experienced with audio engineering designed it, and Chris at Google. And the media streams alternative Robert Callahan was pushing wasn't good. And so I think we're going to do audio data. I'm sorry, audio.
Web audio.
Web audio. We're going to do web audio. And I would hope that plus others would be able to make it.
Well, so far the fake implementations that I've seen have it so that you can't really do anything with your captured audio. And you need to like somehow be able to stream it to a filter or something like that, but no one.
I think it's going to be like Chrome, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll likely land first in Chrome, and we're not there yet. We will be probably within a couple of months.
The standard set draft, so you have to get two implementations out of draft, right? We'll do it.
Great, thanks.
Oh, sorry. Just I don't know who was first.
You can pick.
I don't know.
I had a question
We'll
for
go.
Rob.
Sure.
Regarding the game API with the controller, like
Yep.
what kind of interfaces, like USB, Bluetooth, or
Sure. So yeah, for the game API, the interfaces that it's using are USB and Bluetooth right now. So basically, anything that's recognized as a gamepad by the operating system is likely to be recognized by the gamepad API. So for example, it could be a Logitech USB controller, an Xbox 360 controller, or a PS3 wireless with Bluetooth. That will all work.
now does Sony and Microsoft have to have a certain like protocol for the interaction with that you guys have to account for on your side, or?
So they usually use a specific set of APIs. So I think there's X input and direct input. Those are the two sort of bases. So we support both of those, which is why if it's recognized by the operating system and is served in that way.
Direct input for direct X or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not the engineer on that project, but that's the idea that I'm getting, is that if the operating system recognizes that as a gamepad via one of those technologies, then yeah, it will be recognized by the browser. So
could you theoretically, if you had a Bluetooth-enabled like mobile device, use that as a controller also?
Or you can just ship it with WebSockets so that you can create your own like fake version of the API and use your phone.
Oh yeah, we actually have like a really cool demo with that, which works on a TV. So you have your TV, and instead of using your remote control, you can use your phone, which is pretty cool too. Oh, I think he was first.
Yeah, a couple questions. When does Firefox, or is Firefox ever going to have like native PDF support?
we have PDF.js now. I believe that's built in, bundled with the browser.
The shipping with like it's in the on migration on that.
It's basically a JavaScript representation of PDF.
Then how long till, okay, next question. When is Navigator.moz apps going to actually be available on a desktop version of Firefox?
It's in Lightly today,
Okay.
so it's working its way through.
And then last question is actually, when can we anticipate Opera support request animation frame?
We are working on it, definitely. So we're really like working on it. I cannot just put a date to it, but yeah, we are on it. That's what I can say. So soon, hopefully.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see your work on the controllers. Is there any discussion among the different browser vendors to kind of standardize on the controller set, and if you can just talk about that?
Okay, yeah, so the question was about the Gamepad API and the standardization process. So, yeah, we're working with Google on that. We've been working with Google from day one on that. So we started with the spec, and once we had the spec fleshed out, we started implementing it. So Google have actually got this in Chrome Dev today. It's behind a flag, so you have to sort of enable the flag, but you can actually use the gamepad. They've implemented the Gamepad API in the same way, but they've not implemented all the functionality we have. Whereas, so for example, in Firefox you can listen for connection events. In Chrome you don't get that connection event, but you can still get the gamepad data when a gamepad is plugged in. The difference with the Chrome version and the Firefox version is they've already got it out in dev. We are still in a sort of custom build that you have to download. You can use it, but you have to download a custom build. It's not in Nightly yet. We're working on that, and we've only got one dev working on it, so we're trying to get that done as fast as possible.
Any plans from Opera for support?
Yeah, we're working on that one too. Not as hard as we're working on request animation frame, but we're working on that one too.
About NFC support.
Okay, just last one, because he says we're running over, or someone there says we're running over. So I don't know, can we take one more, or do we end it and we just chat among ourselves? Okay.
NFC support. Near-field communication.
I don't know about that one.
I can answer that quickly. So that's something we're working on with BetaGecko. That's one of the APIs that we want to implement when we release the phone, because it's going to be kind of interesting to hook into those parts in the mobile device.
Would be a better way to connect to the remote debugger instead of going through the network? Just pair up through NFC.
Just lay it on a pad or something.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
I mean, not maybe because I don't work personally on that, but I think, the people that work on our Dragonfly team have analyzed like a lot of these alternatives. And for now, I think, well, we can discuss it later, but there were like some issues with that, and we can just talk about it later because, yeah.
The short answer is it's coming.
I don't think they're going to be happy about it. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.